City Council Committee on Ordinances, License, Legal Affairs, co-posted the Committee of the Whole met in Council Chambers Thursday, August 28th, 2025 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing the matters listed below. Notice of this meeting was posted on August 1st, 2025 at 12:23 p.m. We have all members of the committee present. From the Committee of the Whole, we have Councilors Stott and Merkel, and from the city, we have Amanda Cincola. So we are discussing the ordinance to amend ordinance relative to zoning, amend Section 7, Special Residential District Regulations by adding a new Section 7.4, Smart Growth Overlay District, and this is in reference to the Salem State, South Campus, Harrison Road, Smart Growth Overlay District. So I will, at this time, I'll first turn it over to Amanda Cincola to talk through background behind this, some questions that come from the council, and then we will turn it over to the councilors to ask questions, and we'll take some public comment.
Thank you. So I guess I'll go over the planning board recommendation in the most recent letter. If that's okay. So the planning board had recommended positively on this ordinance and had a few comments that they included in there. The first comment was regarding veteran housing, and that they had recommended that the developer consider or have a good faith effort in encouraging veteran housing. And no change to zoning is necessary for that. That's a consideration that they wanted to include for the developer. Their second comment was regarding parking minimums and maximums. The ordinance proposed a 1 space per unit minimum for multifamily, and then there were some other minimums, and then a multiplier of 1.75 for a maximum. Given another discussion we're having through the city council process on right-sizing our parking requirements, the planning board had recommended removing the minimums from this ordinance, and that way it aligns with other discussions and efforts we're having in the city. So if the city council would like to remove the minimums, the regulations allow that, but the regulations, the 40R regulations, require parking maximums. And that's because it's a smart growth principle, and the goal of the parking maximum is to reduce driving by limiting parking supply. So we still propose 1.75 as that cap, that parking maximum. We got to that number by, we've talked to developers. We have the benefit of working and collaborating with a development team on this 40R district, and so they have vetted that number. We also looked at it against what we saw through our perfect fit parking analysis on the ground, and found that developers are building to a supply of 0.8, I believe. And so we saw that as being feasible and vetted it through the development community. So that's how we got to the 1.75. The planning board also had noted a concern with the 120-day time frame, and that is the decision has to be made within 120 days of the application being filed. That's a regulation, and that's a requirement by Massachusetts Chapter 40R, so it's not something we can change. But that's the purpose of having a really in-depth ordinance here with design standards, because we want to do the work early on to make sure the projects that would move forward fit within what the community would want to see. That 120 days can be extended through a mutual agreement between the developer and the planning board. And the planning board can also condition the project. And so if they get a design that they see, we're almost there, but we don't like the species of trees, or we want to see something change, that can be conditioned in there. Or they could say, hey, developer, we really want you to still work on the circulation plan or whatever it is. We think this is going to need more time, and you can do that mutual agreement for an extension. So there's no action required with that. I just wanted to be clear on what that 120 days is. The planning board did discuss that they would like to see an opportunity for a joint hearing with the design review board. And that way it would help that that timeline and meeting that 120 days. That's already allowed. The planning board and design review board, we don't need to make any changes to the ordinance, and there's nothing in here that precludes a joint meeting. But if the council would like to explicitly state it in the ordinance, you have that option as well. So I included language on page 4 of the letter that is in the SharePoint file for this meeting as well. And you'll see the red line that's sort of in the middle of the paragraph that just says, the planning board may choose to review the application at a joint meeting with the design review board. So rather than planning board starting it and referring it, you start it together. So that's an option. And the last comment the board had was they wanted some clarification on the definition of landscape and open space. And so staff has developed some definitions here and did review this with the chair of the planning board, who vetted it and was comfortable with the language proposed in this letter. So that's a summary. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. So just to summarize here, from the planning board, the actionable items that we have in front of us, to remove the parking minimums or just the residential minimum. I just want to make sure we all understand that, because I think it outlines on 4.5, is it to recommend to remove all?
Yeah, the planning board recommendation was to remove all minimums.
The joint meeting language, this is already something that is already possible and allowed. This would just clarify that it's possible and allowed.
Correct.
So wouldn't materially change anything in the ordinance to put it in or not put it in. And then the definition of landscape versus open space, which we have in there. Okay. I think Councilor Morsillo had a question.
Thank you, Chair. Amanda, can you go back to your discussion of the 120 days? So if we look at this, at that South Salem project, that campus project, there's like 3 distinct things happening, right? There's the reuse, there's up on the hill, then there's the reuse of the existing, I don't know what building that is, and then there's the residential stuff. So would they bring that in like a piece at a time for the 120 days, or is it the entire project, the entire site that would come in?
So the 120 days is for each site plan review application. And this project team that would be following the 40R district is proposing phasing it. So it'll be one project at a time. So as a site plan review submitted for, let's say, the adaptive reuse, that is 120 days. And then following that, there may be the new construction site plan review, and that's 120 days.
Okay. Because I think that was one of the things that the planning board had an issue with, was like taking that whole chunk and then even looking at the Shetland Park project, and like 120 days clearly isn't enough to do that project any good. So all projects like that would be guided by the planning department to come in phases, right?
Yeah, and if you think about 40R as a tool overall, typically communities have, a large area zoned as a 40R, and we don't expect the entire district to be built out at once. You have projects come in at, one at a time. And so whether it's the Harrison Road that's in front of us or Shetland, we'd have a section, a project come in one at a time.
Okay, and so was the planning board happy with that explanation and with their ability to extend it? When agreed by both sides and all of that, were they comfortable then?
I don't want to speak for the planning boards whether they're happy or not with it. They seemed to understand it's a state requirement and that we can't change that, and had recommended that a joint meeting or considered a joint meeting as an option to help with that timeline. And so they seemed comfortable with it and ultimately recommended approval of the ordinance. So that makes it seem like they're comfortable with it.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Hepworth. I wanted to talk about the parking minimum recommendation from the planning board for a second. So I am in favor of removing a minimum. I really believe that Wynn and Avalon are going to make sure that there's at least ample parking for the residents there. I think that would be something they wouldn't do. I know that when it comes to market rate housing and just that site in general, they're going to make sure there's enough parking for enough residents. But removing the minimum will help with a little more space when it comes to either their parking garage situation where they're trying to figure out how many spaces are going to be fit, and also the green space. I would like to see the green space be expanded a little bit more than what they have. And also, this may open up the door for a discussion on, a little more of a mixed use, whether it be a retail aspect for the residents at that site. I could see the potential for that. So for that reason, when I'm ready to make a motion, I would like to do that, but just want to discuss that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Councilor Merkel?
Thank you, Chair Hepworth. Not being a member of committee, I just wanted to ask if Amanda could repeat what you said about the veterans housing with the glitch in the audio. I just didn't catch it. Thank you.
Yeah, so the planning board had asked, they acknowledged that the Salem initiatives to designate concentrated housing for veterans, their ask was for the private developers to consider making a good faith effort to encourage multi-inclusion of veterans and family housing in the development. So it's not a zoning recommendation, but just asking a good faith effort of the development team.
Councilor Cohen?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not that into putting things in the ordinance that are like, please do this. So I appreciate Councilor Marcello's clarification on the 120 days. I'm fine with including the landscaping open space language because typically that's going to go through that planning board body anyway. They're kind of the final say on that kind of stuff. And it sounds like the Joint Hearing Design Review Board also doesn't require action. And doesn't the Design Review Board, all their decisions get referred to the planning board anyway?
Yes, the design review board makes a recommendation to the planning board. The language in here is just that the board may choose to start as a joint meeting rather than having the planning board start and then refer it separately to the design review board.
I mean, would that expedite things? I mean, I'm not sure why they couldn't schedule a joint meeting anyway. I mean, there's lots of committees that have joint meetings, as liaison to the Disabilities Commission, we had a joint meeting with the Historical Commission. We didn't need anything, in an ordinance to make that happen.
Yeah, that's correct. And there's nothing in the ordinance that precludes a joint public hearing from happening with the design review board and the planning board. This just explicitly states it. So it's clear that that is an option.
Councilor Marcello?
Thank you, Chair. It's not mandatory, but I think that when residents go through and read this stuff to prepare, having that called out that the first meeting could be a joint meeting with the design review board makes more sense because usually the planning board, like you said, does a referral to the design review board. And so the planning board makes the referral to the design review board for the project, and then they come back with their recommendation. So yeah, they can do it, but I like it explicitly in here since it's brand new stuff, and it just helps people understand the process a little bit more. So, yeah.
Councilor Driscoll?
Thank you, Councilor Hepworth. I just have a problem with taking away the removing all the parking minimums. We haven't voted yet on the right size parking. I think this should wait. I mean, I would hate to them put this in there and then the overflow go into the neighborhoods and cause a problem that way. I'd like to see the right size voted on first, and then we can revisit this.
Councilor Cohen.
Thank you. I respectfully disagree with that for this reason. This project is actually proposed at 24%, at 60%, and it's tiered. And there's a lot of the units are as low as like 30%. So I actually feel like there'll be less of a need overall for parking than what we're considering citywide. So I'm for getting rid of it. I'm not actually that into maximums, but that's a requirement for the 40R.
Councilor Marceau.
If you don't mind, could I just read what the changes are so that people are clear on what the changes are? So the requested change to make it compliant with the regulations says a maximum off-street parking space required, multifamily housing, 1.75 spaces per dwelling unit, business office, 1.75 spaces for each employee, professional office, 1.75 spaces for each professional person, plus 1.75 spaces for each other employee, plus 3.5 additional spaces for each professional person in the case of medical or dental clinics. Retail, which, is there going to be retail in that particular spot?
It's a permitted use.
Okay, so retail is 1.75 spaces for each 150 square feet of gross floor area of the retail area, excluding storage area. Multifamily housing, business office, and ancillary uses, 1.75 spaces per employee. Age-restricted senior housing, what is being proposed is 1.75 spaces per unit, which I think is even more than what they asked for, which is why the maximums make sense in this particular case. And then the last one is supportive housing, 1.75 spaces per unit. So it's not like we're getting rid of all of it. It just sets the maximum at 1.75 instead of the minimum at 1, when the developer's been pretty clear with the neighborhood, especially at those meetings, how they're going to do the parking and allocate parking for each building and use type, I think, up there. So if this follows what they've told the neighborhood, then I think it's fine. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I do want to note that section 7.4.5, the parking requirements, that is in the umbrella district. So that is for all uses in any future 40R district. But again, we feel very comfortable with these numbers looking at the citywide actual multifamily buildings that are being built, what the parking requirements are, or what.
So what we'd be voting on here is 7.4.5. We would leave the 1.75 minimum, and then we remove this entire table. Is that correct?
It would be 1.75 maximum, right?
1.75 maximum, then we remove this entire table that all lists one space per unit.
It would be 1.7. It would be just as Councilor Marcillo had listed it, with 1.75 maximum, and then professional office, which is an allowed use in the umbrella, retail, multifamily with a business use. Each one of those have a maximum.
And this is in 7.4.5?
Correct.
Okay.
And then 7.4.8E is specific to this subdistrict that has age-restricted housing and supportive housing.
You all have 7.4. Do you have everything in the ordinance there? Okay. That would be great if you. We don't have it printed right now though. Sure.
So I move that in section 7.4.5, parking requirements, the following are the maximum numbers of off-street parking spaces permitted within the smart growth overlay district. Such parking spaces may be provided as surface parking or within garages or other structures. And so that includes the strikeout of the lines and the change to maximum. And then the table, which I just went through, which instead of minimum says maximum off-street parking, and then changes everything to 1.75. And in addition, in the professional office category, the plus 3.5 additional spaces for each professional person in the case of a medical or dental clinic.
Any further discussion or any second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Varela. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of the amendment to the parking? Any opposed? I see 3 hands in favor, 1 opposed. The matter. 4 hands in favor, 1 opposed. The matter carries.
And then further in section 7.4.7.4, adding the line, the planning board may choose to review the application at a joint meeting of the design review board. And that comes as the second sentence in that paragraph.
Can you repeat the section?
7.4.7.4.
Second.
Second by Councilor Varela. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? The matter carries.
And then finally, in section 7.4.1, definitions, adding landscape defined as outdoor spaces, both natural and constructed. Landscape includes public or semi-public areas such as parks, complete streets, plazas, terraces, courtyards, and conservation buffers. Landscapes are intended to serve multiple functions, fostering community interaction, enhancing tenant experience, supporting biodiversity, managing stormwater, and reinforcing the identity and resiliency of a site. And secondly, landscaping, which is defined as the installation, arrangement, and maintenance of plant materials, ground cover, decorative features, and related site elements for aesthetic enhancement, screening, or functional improvement of a site, including trees, shrubs, lawns, mulch, irrigation systems, and other components that soften built environments and provide visual cohesion or privacy.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Varela. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? The matter carries.
And then finally, in section 7.4.8F, section 3.1, the planting plan shall provide trees throughout the project, both along streets and within landscapes.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Varela. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Matter carries. Any further questions, comments, or discussion? Councilor Marcelo.
I move that this be referred back to the committee, to the council as amended for positive recommendation for approval.
Councilor Marcelo moves
For second passage.
Councilor Marcelo moves to refer back to the full council for second passage as amended with a positive recommendation. All those seconded by Councilor Varela. All those in favor? Any opposed? That matter carries. Any more motions?
Motion to adjourn.
Councilor Marcelo moves to adjourn. All those in favor? Thank you. We're adjourned. Thank you, Amanda.